All right, here we are in a Mists of Tirna Scithe 11. I wanted to do this commentary. I did time this key a couple days ago now at this point in time of the recording. At the time of completing this key, it was World 8th, US 7th. So pretty impressive run, at least in terms of like myself. I'm very proud of this run and how we did. We were in comms, but comms were pretty sparse. We didn't really need to communicate all that much. We are running a pretty heavy physical comp, and I'm going to kind of talk about certain things during downtime, but I mostly want to kind of break down our route and what was going on in my mind as a tank in this key. So starting off, Mists of Tirna Scithe has a pretty unique, I guess not unique start, but this is a pretty interesting start, especially because we're going to be skipping a lot of this front trash. We're going to be pulling the Spike Claws into this first group with the Villager, 2 Soul Carvers, and Harvester. We want to make sure everyone is in melee. So these Soul Carvers won't actually leap if everyone's within like 5 to 8 yards. So as long as everyone's in melee, you don't have bleeds going out and you don't have group cleave damage going out, which is really nice. Now, we did just come out of raiding, so I was a little rusty on my button pressing, because in raid you just kind of spam Tiger Palm the whole time. But this is a pull where you want to commit a lot to as a tank. You want to commit pretty much all your defensives. I already used Health Pots. I've already now have Dampen Harm rolling. I've already used Celestial Brew. I still have Black Ox Brew as well as Fortifying Brew in my pockets. And now I'm Ring of Piecing the Soul Carvers away because they do leech when they attack you, when they have their Claws of Thors or something like that active. We are going to be skipping this trash. Brewmasters can do it. I just posted a short the other day about it, but with a rogue, it makes it a lot easier. One less step essentially, and you can do it twice. So we're actually sapping the second group as well, and now we're looking to pick up our green mushrooms in this room. These rooms can be opened with a Night Elf, a Tauren, or someone who has herbalism, I'm pretty sure. So as long as you have one of those people, it's pretty easy to actually manage this dungeon. So we're going to pick up those 10% agility buff or main stat buff. It's very, very good. Going into this pull, now we're going to be focusing down one bow breaker. When these guys hit 50% health, they start doing like a thrash that does a ton of physical group damage. If you push them both at the same time, most likely, at least once you have Fortified involved, it could be lethal depending on the level of your group. So you want to make sure you're only pushing them 1 to 50% health first, letting that tick down, and then swapping to the other bow breaker. The other thing I'm trying to do is I'm trying to play inside the F-Flow. F-Flow is very expensive to constantly spam cast and replace, and F-Flow allows the Residur to actually have high healing. The mob's about to hit 50%, and here comes the Furious Thrashing. You just want to make sure you are using an offensive here. You can see like Frenzied goes out to keep the warrior alive, but we're, again, super, super healthy here. Now, Brewmasters, again, are pretty strong for this current Xalatath affix. We can use Ring of Peace to pretty much get rid of everything. Leg Sweep is also very good, especially if you're playing the increased range on your Leg Sweep cast. That one is also strong. So here's a second Furious Thrashing. The F-Flow isn't down, but that's okay. We're still able to stay pretty healthy when there's only one going off. Now, again, if both were going off at the same time, we'd be probably in a world of hurt. And once again, I'm just trying to stay in the F-Flow here. Something kind of unique that I'm doing is I am running Light Brewing instead of Training of Nizao. This is going to give me more Celestial healing. I've been trying to gauge how much damage in Fortified keys you're going to be taking in the 11 range. Like, this is our first 11 of the season. So I'm trying to figure out, I'd rather be tanky and fail the key because we're missing a damage check than be like, do a lot of damage, but then fall over because I'm not optimizing like my defensives or using the most HPS throughput possible to keep myself alive. Anyways, this is a very easy fight. Basically kick Ingra Maloch, aim the tree's frontal at a wall if you can, and then melee, or actually DPS, just really want to focus down the tree. It's not really worth messing around with trying to optimize your damage in this level of content. I'm sure later on in the season it's going to be very important to eke out as much damage as you can onto Ingra Maloch. The idea is that you want to beat him before the third, I guess, burn, because you want to be able to tunnel. And when I say burn, I definitely mean like the this Embrace Darkness cast, which makes him basically pseudo-immune to damage. He does take a little bit. I think it's like a 99% damage reduction or 80% damage reduction, something in that. I think they might have changed it, but you basically want to make sure you're pushing the tree before he's in this phase too long, because as you can see with this Embrace Darkness debuff or aura, we're taking a ton of group damage. But then once we push him, Ingra Maloch is going to start taking a ton of damage here. We should have lusted. We didn't. We kind of forgot about it. Not going to lie. So we're going to end up lusting the second burn, which actually makes more sense because we'll have like things like True Shot probably for it, as well as maybe some other cooldowns depending. But this boss ends up going down pretty quickly. We actually don't really see Embrace Darkness again. We see it one more time, but it's like right when we're phasing again, so it's not a big deal. And now we're back on Ulfron. As you can see, I actually have Ingra Maloch focused, and this is going to allow me to kick him without having to actually swap targets. This is a really good trick for any player, not just tanks or Brewmasters specifically. A set focus macro is really nice. You can essentially set it up so as long as you're focusing a mob, you'll kick that mob that you're focusing. And if you don't have a set focus target, you'll still just kick your regular like target. You want to try to stack up the Tears of the Force as well, as close as you can to melee, and then move as a group, and it'll make it a little bit easier to dodge. Fears will be a little bit more manageable. Speaking of the fear, you'll always run directly away from Ingra Maloch, so if you position yourself like I am here, you actually run right into the tree and you don't run really far away. This can be good or bad, depending on if swirls are coming out. So if it overlaps with Tears of the Forest, you're probably going to die. But outside of that, like if you know the timing, you can just line yourself up with the wall or the tree and not run that far. Or ultimately, you just run with a Resto Shaman who has Tremor Totem. So right here, I was talking about lust. I was like, I don't know if I should use drums or like we should maybe see. So we end up lusting now, I believe, which comes out a little late, but that's okay. And then we're going to use this lust to burn the rest of the boss. So the idea is you want to burn roughly about 5 to 10% health during this normal phase. And then when you actually have him taking the damage increase, you want to be able to burn 30%. So it's a 10, 30, 10, 30. And then the last 20%, you can just focus Ingra Maloch, try to do as much damage as possible. And you ideally kill before the Embrace Darkness cast. Now, for some reason, DBM isn't showing me when he's going to cast that. Sometimes he casts it way earlier than normal. It just really depends. I don't know what controls that. I don't know if I'm wrong about that, but I've noticed sometimes I feel like he can cast Brace Darkness really early, and sometimes I feel like it just takes forever for him to actually cast it. And here comes the Fear. Normally, I've seen him do this Fear and then go into Embrace, but this time he's just casting Spirit Bolt, and for some reason I keep rolling the wrong direction. So he's in Touch of Death range, so I'm going to just pop that there and we're good. So that is the first boss in the first kind of area. As you notice, we skipped around a lot of trash. We only have 14%. That's obviously really low, but it's way easier for us to pull a bunch of bugs later on. It's just easier trash to manage than the starting trash. The starting trash has a lot of death conditions from different AoE types of damage, from like the Furious Thrash to the Harvest to the tank. Tanks, there's a lot of lethal damage in the first like couple early pulls compared to the later pulls. Here, Banter's actually pulled through the wall. I don't remember how he did that. I think he sent a pet through, which used to be a strategy. I don't know. I thought they changed it. So seeing the mobs, I wasn't ready for this, but they came through. It's not too bad. We do need to be careful of the Guardian. The Defenders are the new changed mobs, and they just kind of, they'll charge your party members and knock them back. But the Defender does Anima Slash, which does a pretty nasty dot on the tank. Whenever that happens, that's when you want to use your defensives. I feel pretty scared here, actually. So you saw that I used Dampen, and then I rolled that into Fortifying Brew, and now I'm going to probably have to commit the Black Ox Brew here, which I just did. And we're going to try to keep cutting these out. Now, luckily, the pack is about to die, and the Guardians or slash Defenders are immune to, or I guess the Defenders are immune to CC, so I'm able to drop the Ring of Peace to help get those Xalatath Orbs. The idea in this key, and, you know, I think people think Mists is free, and it generally is an easier key, but at this level, you have to be very aggressive with your defensives, and you have to make sure you're not overlapping too much. Now, luckily for us, our group average item level was probably like the 614. The only person who was sub 610 was our healer, who was at 609, but everyone else was like 615 with tier 4, or 4 tier set pieces. This pull is actually very lethal to your damage dealers, or I guess your party in general. The Defenders will charge with Expel, and the Stalkers will do their Bite. And if all of those happen to target the same person, that person will probably just instantly get evaporated. So we have to be very careful about how we're doing that. I don't know if there's a way to bait it or not, but we got I'm assuming we just got lucky here and ended up not having to do a lot. But our group was also pretty good about using their defensives and health pots and stuff like that. And of course, Fairs did a great job at keeping everyone alive when needed. And now something I didn't mention, you can actually watch Mistcaller at the start of the maze, and it's easier if you put a world marker on our head, ideally one that contrasts well with the background, but I think we use Skull, but I like to use X personally when I get to market. But it allowed us to see the first 2 doors she went through without having to play the little minigame. Then the next 2 rooms we need to play the minigame for, and then after the mini-boss room, which is typically room 4, it auto-solves it for you. There's a weak core that does that. I don't have it personally, but our group did, I believe. So we were able to quickly get through the doors. Anyways, in this pack, Tender, you want to kick, but the priority to kill is the Stalker, if that makes sense. So you can see there I did set focus to the Tender to make sure we're kicking the Nourish the Forest cast. It applies a really kind of insane percent health scaling healing to every enemy, which is not good. You don't want them to heal. When these pulls last long, that's when you start to run out of defensives and the tank or your group has the threat of dying. Now, it's funny that they changed these mobs because there's actually a lot more group damage now than there used to be, or at least a lot more tank damage, especially with the tank changes. So your healer isn't as capable of running around figuring it out while the group just handles the mobs. So we were a little bit slow, and then we ended up running through the wrong door because we kind of gambled it. So we tried going through the left door, so it's obviously the right door here, and we're going to head in, and it's going to be, once the door stops bugging, this is actually room number 4. Room number 5 will be the mini-boss. I kind of messed that up earlier, and then room 6 and maybe 7 will generally be then more packs, generally packs of 5. So this is a double tender room. This is probably the hardest room to deal with in a pug because there's 2 casts that you have to kick. They're both on melee timers, meaning that 1 melee kick can get them. So we marked 1 with Skull, 1 without a marker, and I said I'm managing Skull in Discord, and everyone else was supposed to look out for the one that's not marked, and we did that pretty successfully here. There isn't a priority to kill the tenders as long as you're kicking them. If you're not kicking them, you want to blow them up immediately. Generally in pugs, I recommend targeting the tenders, but the defenders are also a great target because they just generally have more health and are a little bit more obnoxious to your group. The other mechanic that they added were those giant like mist veils that they spawn, those giant blue circles on the ground. You want to make sure mobs aren't standing in them. They give them a 30% damage reduction, which is not good. It makes the pull slower. And on top of that, if your group stands in them, you take a very lethal amount of damage very quickly. So you definitely want to avoid that. This is the hardest mini boss out of the 3. The frog has a frontal that's avoidable. The like toxin guy also, I believe, is like mostly avoidable, if not dodgeable, and it's dispellable. But this dragon applies a very nasty damage taken increase in the form of the shred armor cast that will stack, and it's almost impossible to drop. And I think if you roll too far away, if I'm not mistaken, it turns fervent, which means that it's going to hit a random close player, which will kill them. So this idea here is that it's a DPS race. You want to make sure you're still popping cooldowns on this. We did commit like warrior CDs. We're holding on to True Shot, which was a good call because it came up middle of this pull. And then the Bob also casts a pool of radiance, and that heals it up over time. You want to make sure you're moving out quickly. Brewmasters could opt into taking the speed taunt, hasty provocation, but it's not generally needed. I'm in pretty easy as long as you're making sure you're using CDs on it. This next room then has, again, the maps or the route does change through here depending on just the key you're in, but this room specifically has 2 guardians, a tender, a stalker, and the guy who crafts bramblethorns. Definitely don't remember the name of that mob, but you want to make sure you're interrupting tender as well as the root cast, the bramblethorn cast, or the bramblethorn coats. If that gets applied to a mob and then it breaks, everyone gets rooted for 8 seconds, which could be very, very deadly for a lot of people. I end up going down here. Fortifying Brew just came up. I could have health potted, but actually the lethal damage that I took ended up happening within less than a second. So I'm kicking myself. I did sit on pot. Fort Brew just came up. I could have kited. And the warrior could, and this is something that he thought about doing. We're discussing it in Discord at this point, but you can actually have a prot warrior or a fury warrior actually taunt this anima slash, and what ends up happening is then you can reflect it. Banchers took a lot of damage there. He took one of those. Our warrior is also kiting. He's looking a little bit healthier, hence why I taunted off of Banchers first, and then it's just the guardians left. So our group ended up killing them. This was a little bit of an oopsie on my part. I should have kited earlier. I should have committed the health pot a little bit. I shouldn't have tried to eke out as much damage or the healing from the health pot, and Fort Brew then would have come up and I could have chained into that and it would have been fine. I didn't catch if Ironbark was available. It could have also had that too. Anyways, all of these packs kind of slap. And last but not least, we're at 51%. We skipped a little bit at the start, but what we're going to end up doing is going into boss room here. And then in the boss room, this is a cool little trick, but you can actually pull a pack through the wall as long as your maze route doesn't have you pulling it instead. There are probably some other rooms you could pull with Hunter Pet, if I'm not mistaken, but we're going to end up actually pulling this next pack through the wall. You run onto this kind of south side, and then you can actually just tag it with a range ability. Taunt should work too, but I use Crackling Jade Lightning there. Now this pack does a lot of tank damage. 2 guardians and any pull can get really scary, especially because this anima debuff, this anima blade, does stack. Having 2 stacks is very scary. And then of course the stalker and the stinger both do a ton of single target group damage that your healer has to be aware of. So this is a scary pull. If you are going to pull it, don't make sure you're respecting it. Is essentially what it comes down to. And because it's fortified, Brewmaster is going to struggle a lot more with trash than it is going to do bosses. Anyways, right there you can actually see the anima slash was reflected by our warrior for almost 4 million damage, which is a lot. So that was a very good spell reflect there. It was actually able to push this guardian very, very low before it actually got its next cast off. I'm going to start cutting out a little bit here. Not that I'm really scared of dying to just 1 guardian, but it's worth just kind of getting ready to pull the boss because we are against a timer. Ring of Peace is really broken for that. I just dropped it and it actually cleared all of them. So that means we're going to this boss with like 10 or 20% haste, which is super nice. Mistcaller is a very simple boss. There isn't a lot of tank can do, but the one important thing you need to make sure you're doing is kicking this patty cake cast. So I have Mistcaller set focus, and this means I can target the Vulpine with CC if I need to. I can target the intermission ads when I need to without missing the kick on Mistcaller. The only thing I do need to pay attention to is her positioning. When you're running to a new ad and patty cake is coming up, you need to make sure you're watching that cast, because if you miss it, you're going to get disoriented, which could pretty much wipe your group. 70% guessing game comes out. My group's a little bit better and quicker at identifying this. I identify this one pretty quickly, but the next two I'm actually pretty slow at. Be careful about tanking Mistcaller in the water. When she's in the water, it's a slightly lower elevation, and the dodgeball arrows can get clipped underneath the ground. I don't know if they've ever fixed that, and if that's the case and you can't see the arrows, you don't know where they're going, and often what happens is your group will end up wiping because everyone gets hit by dodgeball at the same exact time, which is just not good. And it's just these three basic mechanics. This boss is never very scary for the tank. When you're going to use defensives on this fight, it's always going to be during the intermission because there's a lot more going on. You have a Vulpine running around, you have dodgeballs, you have patty cake, and you have the pulsing AoE damage. So again, if I'm ever going to use a defensive, it's going to be in the intermission phase. The next phase will happen at 40%. I don't know if that bug still exists where you can push during like the dodgeball cast or the freeze tag cast, and then it actually like will bug out, but here we get guessing game anyways. I think it's the flower, the circle one, the one that we're at basically. Very fortunate. I do need to be careful of this Vulpine that's right underneath us. I'm trying to move the boss off of it so we can actually see it. It was a very good kidney shot by our rogue. I'm able to target the boss while I'm still making sure that I'm kicking the patty cake. And then we're into dodgeball. So the big healing is always going to happen during intermission because of the pulsing damage. Outside of that, this fight is very low healing throughput required, so it's a pretty easy dungeon. Rested Druids are pretty broken. As long as you don't accidentally put like a dot on the Vulpine, you can see it's just rooted out there, not having to worry about it at all. It makes this fight a little bit easier. The Vulpine is like the secret hard mechanic because what ends up happening, sometimes it gets into melee and then people don't notice it because there's just a lot going on and they get stunned, and then the dodgeball comes out and wipes you. So this fight will go to shit very quickly is pretty much what I'm trying to get at. We get a nice root there, so we don't have to worry about it during this, and it looks like it's going to be the flower. So I'm being careful because I know patty cake's supposed to come out, or it just happened. So before you make a big movement with the Mistcaller, you want to make sure you're kicking patty cake first. If it just happened and then the ad spawn, you can move pretty quickly. If patty cake hasn't happened for a while in the ad spawn, you kind of just want to let the DPS go off and do what they need to do. But tanks, you definitely want to make sure you're not getting hit by the patty cake ability. Anyways, the boss is going to go down here, and we're looking pretty good with about 12 minutes left and 40% trash needed. We're going to get a lot of trash down here. This is a very, very good area. Most of the mobs have steady or low damage, steady and low damage, like group damage wise, and the tank damage is mostly just auto attacks, which is much easier than the start of the dungeon. Hence why you're trying to skip to get most of your trash from the end. Now there's a couple scary things in here, like Acid Nova is going to be pretty deadly from the Staghorn, so you never really want to pull more than 2 of those. And then the Reavers are also pretty scary if you don't have a poisonous spell, but we have 2 of them, so we're sitting pretty good here. We're going to pull this as a double because we have all of our CDs. So getting threat here is a little careful. Like DPS need to be super careful here because tanks need a second to get threat on everything, especially when you're playing with something like a Fury Warrior that could just go big Zug. Luckily, I have 2 MDs in this group, so I'm not too worried about it. We get an early leg sweep on like the first set of swirls, but then after that, we're going to just kind of play around them. The only thing you're really looking out for in terms of kicks is going to be the Staghorn. Whenever it casts the Stimulate Resistance, it's a big absorb. You want to make sure you stop it. And then there's the Stimulate Regeneration, which is just a pulsing heal that you also want to kick. And then this Acid Nova does a burst of damage, but then it makes everyone take 20% more damage. So this is when the tank needs to use a defensive. Outside of that, we're just out here vibing. So we're looking really good. Now here's where the key goes a little south, and we could have done this better, and this is kind of on me. I should have waited or should have been more clear. We were in Discord after all. Again, not talking too much, but we were in a voice chat. Staghorn needs to be kicked. But we have these Reavers that I wanted to CC out by using roots. Our Resto Druid was taking a little bit too long. Here comes the Acid Nova, as well as the dots from the Acid Golets. So our healer wasn't set up, because she was really focused on trying to CC the ads, which we should have just like committed blind to, used Para, we could have used Frozen Trap. There was a lot of options to CC them, but instead we had our healer do it, which was definitely not the play. Luckily, I am able to survive here. I am running a pretty tanky build between light brewing and my trinkets, but we end up having a lot of deaths here. We are already down 3 people. Our rogue has died, our Resto Druid has died, and our hunter just died there. And the problem too is that the run, while we can run back because we were able to grab the little like checkpoint thing, we sapped a mob to walk by it. So people who do release need to be very careful. Luckily, most of the people can either stealth back or feign death. But now we're in combat with these Reavers, so we're going to have to pull them, which was the plan all along, but I just didn't want them at the start of the pull. I wanted to bring them in later on or for the next pull here. But that's okay. So small mistake. Just pull them. They're really not that scary if you have poison dispels. You just always want to make sure you're poison dispelling pretty much on cooldown. As a Brewmaster, I have Detox, and then Druids can also dispel. Because we have 2 Reavers, I'm deciding not to chain into the next pack. Typically what you do is you double it up, because again, there's not a lot of damage outside of the Acid Golets having very small damage over time effects on our DPS. And now that the mobs are around 30% health, we're going to chain into the next pack. And then this will put us around that like 85-ish% mark. So we should have a couple more pulls after boss to do. I don't remember if we did boss first or I think we did it after. I think we did it last. But this is a pretty good run so far. It's watching swirls. Now, the swirl is a cast. So the swirl is indicated while the cast is going. Then once it finishes, it'll erupt. So you could actually save things like group stuns, like Shockwave or Leg Sweep, or even like Typhoon and stuff like group knocks to prevent these acid globules from landing. And they will recast, but if you notice that someone's kind of in a tight spot or you're trying to move with the mobs or whatever, you can just get a quick CC on them. And we are now at 89%. So we need 11 more percent. It's very easy to get this 11% back here. There are a couple more Staghorn pulls. Again, Staghorns are scary, but the rest of these pulls back here aren't that lethal. So we're going to start with this. Again, kicking Staghorn, and then the Gorger's just going to do a little bit of basically just some ground denial with swirls. And that's it. I can't remember if we pull in Reavers here or if we decide to continue pulling other packs, but we're basically just waiting on CDs to kind of come back up. We do have True Shot and we do have Avatar and Wreck, so we're looking pretty good. And again, Rogues kind of always do damage. They don't really have a cooldown. At least Outlaw doesn't have a cooldown you have to keep track of necessarily. I am tracking Adrenaline Rush, but ultimately doesn't matter. And now that I'm actually saying that in terms of like cooldown tracking, I believe I need to actually improve my Omni CD. Anyways, this will be the last pull. We end up not pulling Reavers. I was thinking of a different run that I did. But this is basically kick Staghorn, and you're going to get some dots on your party members and some swirls on the ground. So that means we're going to be going into the last boss with about 5 minutes or so left, which is plenty of time to kill the boss. It's really a fight of, I almost said fruition. Basically, it's like just live and the boss will die. Now, this affix does have a weird kind of thing with this boss because everyone has to stay so spread out and there's a lot of ground denial. Sometimes getting the orbs on this next fight is very challenging. So when orbs do spawn, you need to be very aware of your CC available and you want to stop as many as possible because the boss getting a ton of haste is not great, especially if it's right before consumption. The general tanking strategy for this is keep the boss in the center of the room, and your group generally wants to be behind as a group and the tank should be out and away because they did change this fight. It is now, the ability Mind Link always targets the tank now. It's basically the tank mechanic. It doesn't do a lot of damage to the tank, but because you're the center of it, that means you have to run away. And here comes orbs. I'm hoping that our group gets it. I'm able to get a quick ring apiece, but we are going to miss that last one. So the boss actually has 3 stacks here. And this is what I'm talking about, that it's very important that your group is looking out for these and always ready with something, whether it's Ring of Peace, Leg Sweep, Roar, Shockwave, etc., etc. I don't think Hunters can do a whole lot. I think Explosive Shot should be able to handle it, but you obviously need to, I think you have to be nearby. I don't play Hunter, so I don't really know. Unfortunately, I think our druid went down to, I think Ferris went down to like just a consumption swirl on the ground. You have to be very careful here. Luckily, we do have battle res. You can see our, I think Banchers is trying to get it right now. Or maybe that's our rogue. I can't tell actually. But yeah, this is just kind of a scary fight. That consumption cast happens, I think it's health breakpoints. I don't think it's timer based or anything like that. So you have to do 2 consumption casts. So when consumption comes out, you need to have big damage ready and big healing ready. And you have to be dodging swirls. And you have to be cutting ads. So this fight gets really hectic. I'm trying to pick up threat on these mobs. These mobs are weird because sometimes they just fixate and sometimes they actually have a threat table and they'll just attack your tank. There's also a theory that when you CC them, then they will actually have a threat table, but until then they just fixate. But it's very hard I've never been able to figure it out. If you know, leave it down below. But basically try to keep the ads on our boss, try to bring them to tank if possible. We're going to try to CC these orbs here, but unfortunately I didn't have ring and I didn't have sweep. So the boss once again has 4 stacks. So this is actually pretty scary. And we only gain 6 stacks. So we only have a 12% haste instead of the 20 that we should be getting every time. So here's the second consumption. Luckily, we still have a little bit of this orb helping us out, but the haste, the boss also has haste. I don't know if that actually affects the consumption speed of the ticks, but it does affect auto attacks, which is also scary. So our Druid once again went down. It's not a big deal. Obviously, she's a little lower item level, and the consumption phase is pretty hectic. I think actually maybe this is the death I'm thinking of. There's one where she wild charged, and when she went over one of the green pools on the ground, it actually killed her, which is obviously like not great. So I'm going to opt to paralysis that larva, just so we have one less ad to deal with, so we can eventually get a battle res. She was very far away. Luckily, Banchers was able to get out there and do it. Mindlink is coming out. I'm trying to go for a corner. I'm pinging to make sure my group knows where I'm going, because as long as they know where I'm going, they can head the opposite direction to help me out and also help themselves out, because the longer Mindlink is active for, you're going to be taking a lot of damage. And once again, we have these orbs coming out. I will be able to get a leg sweep here, which is kind of nice. I just need to be careful not to stand in all these swirls. So leg sweep, I leg sweeped a little early, but I didn't want to get hit by swirls. And then we just drop a ring of peace on the rest of the little orbs there. Now, right here, I was trying to decide if I kite the boss because of where the larvas are positioned, or if I just leave him there. And I asked my group, I'm like, is the boss fine here? Like, you guys have room to hit the boss in the ads? And they ended up saying yes, so we left the boss kind of in the center of the room. Be mindful of the boss's position as a tank, because if there's a lot of goop and they can't hit the boss, obviously that's a problem. So at the time, this was, like I said, this is world 8th, US 7th. This is very early in the week, so I can't really be like, oh, this is a crazy good run. People now at this point, I think at the time of recording this video, it's closer to like world 60th, but still, I'm very proud of this run. I like how our group performed in here. And yeah, overall, generally pretty happy. So I hope this guide helps. It's more of a walkthrough, I guess, or a commentary. I definitely made some mistakes. Our group definitely made some mistakes, but this is definitely one of the easier, if not the easiest dungeon to get done. At the time of recording this video, I think it's the only key in the world that's been done out of 12. So yeah, it's definitely a good key if you can roll into it. Anyways, let me know if you have any questions down below. Of course, big shout out to my Patreon supporters, because without them, I wouldn't be able to make content like this. So big shout out to them. Anyways, I hope you're all staying happy, healthy, and I'll catch you all in the next one. Peace.